What's up, you gamers? I love Kirby, and I love talking about Kirby. Clearly. But I haven't played through every Kirby game. A sin, I know. So I thought it'd be a fun idea to play through every Kirby game and document myself playing through them by writing reviews on the games, going in order from the very first to the most recent. Which brings us to the topic of today's video, Kirby's Dream Land. The point where it all began and the start to my dive into spiraling insanity. Kirby's Dream Land was released in 1992 for the Game Boy, being published by Nintendo and developed by HAL Labs. The wondrous creator of the pink puffball, or I guess currently white, everywhere else besides Japan for some reason, they really whitewashed Kirby, was none other than Masahiro Sakurai. He's the guy that made Smash Bros, with these wonderful guys helping develop the game. Sakurai stated that his goal with the game was to make an easy experience for new players, which is fair considering how difficult a lot of the games were at this time. It's obvious this was a good idea as the game sold 5.13 million units, and also prompted an entire series, which I guess is a good thing too. The game itself has been released 4 times, on the Game Boy, on Kirby's Dream Collection for the Wii, on the Nintendo 3DS Virtual Console, and while I was writing this script on the Nintendo Switch Game Boy app. Okay, that's enough history. There are 5 categories I'm going to be covering today to rate the game overall. Story, gameplay, design, art style, and sound design. While the story is widely known about today, there isn't actually a point in the game where the story is talked about, only shown at the end. If you want to find the story, you'll have to look in the instruction manual of the game. The story goes, on a tiny star somewhere far, far away from Earth, there is a very special place known as Dreamland. The Dreamlanders are very happy people who use their magical sparkling stars to play and work among the heavens. That is until one dark night when the gluttonous King Dedede and his rotten band of thieves swooped down from neighboring Mount Dedede for a midnight snack in Dreamland. Not only did they steal all their food, but they stole the Dreamlanders' treasured sparkling stars as well. Because the Dreamlanders didn't have the sparkling stars to get their food anymore, they began to get very hungry. Suddenly a spry little boy named Kirby happened along and said, "Don't worry, I'll get your food and your sparkling stars back." With these words, Kirby set off on his quest toward the dreaded Mount Dedede. We wish him luck. It's not a complex story or anything, but that's because it doesn't need to be. Kirby's Dream Land is meant to be a game that's easier for new players, and this story sets a simple goal to complete. Just beat up Dedede and get the food back. Being the first game in the series, on the Game Boy especially, the controls are pretty simple. We have your jump, inhale, crouch, jump down, float, swallow, and spit, which isn't too different compared to today's moves, only leaving out things like guarding and sliding. However, this is still pretty impressive for a game like this at the time. The suck and float especially are interesting concepts for a game. The most we've seen from a platformer during this time was Mario, and it would be absurd if he could fly in a game like that. And I guess it would be weird to see Mario sucking. You think being able to fly would make the game absurdly easy, and it does in some instances, especially considering how fast Kirby flies in this game particularly, but there are plenty of airborne enemies that make it not that simple. Overall though, the game does have a pretty good feel. I mean, it's a bit clunky to control at times, with inputs occasionally being delayed, but that's to be expected of a Game Boy game. Just the concept of running around and sucking up enemies to use as projectiles is a super interesting concept, and the way they executed it here is really good. Also, look how Kirby squishes against the walls. There aren't really any main problems I have with the controls. I do personally have a problem with flying because it isn't connected to the jump button instead to the D-pad, but that's more of a muscle memory problem. There's also no double star projectiles that pierces enemies, which makes chaining 2 enemies together in one suck feel really disappointing. But these are mostly just nitpicks. The big thing that's missing here though is the copy abilities. This was the first game in the series, so the developers were just trying to get their foot in the door with the concept of inhaling and spitting and basing everything around that. It's definitely weird running through a mainly Kirby game without any copy abilities, but that doesn't make it not fun. Instead of abilities, we have what the manual calls Kirby's Arsenal. While the manual lists all of these, some of them are just one-ups in Bag of Magic Food, which I feel like is just a translation error. That's a Maxim tomato. Here's a list of the actual usable weapons. The first appearance of the invincibility candy, which also plays this familiar tune once you eat it. A bomb. You just inhale the bomb, then spit it out and it shoots a trail of explosion after coming in contact with an entity. The microphone, which is just a screen wipe, similar to the ability. Spicy food, or spicy curry in the original translation, makes Kirby shoot unlimited fireballs for a short time. And lastly, the mint leaf, or originally a sweet potato. That one's a weird change. It allows you to fly while having unlimited projectiles for a short time. These all are cool abilities, and they certainly use some of them in interesting ways, but they're all limited and don't have the same appeal as copy abilities do. That's not to this game's detriment though. They were just figuring out what worked, and you can see how these were inspiration for the copy abilities of the future. Salute your heroes. Last thing I'd like to mention, I didn't really know how to fill this in, but whenever you pause the game and go idle, Kirby just starts dancing, and I think that's really nice. Kirby's Dreamland has 5 areas to explore: Green Greens, Castle Lololo, Float Islands, Bubbly Clouds, and Mount DDD, each with their own boss at the end of them. More importantly, with a title card at the beginning of each of them. Literally the best part of all the classic Kirby games, look at how cute they are, each telling their own little story about the area. I wish I had title cards that would show off the eras of my life. Each level is pretty short, with the game only taking around 20 to 30 minutes to run through. However, the levels we do have are packed full of obstacles to go through and secrets to find. Starting off with the Green Greens, just assume it's green. We're put into this area to try and figure out the controls, which is really nice as it sort of acts as a tutorial. Like, look at this. Once we move forward a bit, we come across a Waddle Dee. This is where we can try to
suck the baby.
Then immediately after, there's another Waddle Dee that prompts you to try to inhale again. However, this time, you have a baby in your mouth. So you instead shoot it out as a projectile, killing both Waddle Dees. Nowadays, there are much more explanatory tutorials, but this was during the Game Boy era. We didn't have your ding-darn fancy signs. So this was a really creative way to show off how to use the main combat option in the game. And in the same vein, they gave you a tutorial right after the Waddle Dees, being this wall. It's clear you can't jump over it, so you have to figure out how to use your floating ability to clear it. There are a bunch of little tutorials like this in the first area, this door for instance, that rewards you with food, or this Bronto in the way of you floating. There's even a mini-boss at the end of the first segment to allow you to use your new skills in a more tense battle. It's such a nice way to show how to use the mechanics in the game, which was needed in a lot of games at this time. After traversing through the plains and forests of Green Greens, you end up at your first boss. This weird tree that's on the box art. No, I'm just kidding, it's good old Wispy Woods. He's a very simple boss, as he is in most games, but it's special here because this is his first appearance. He drops apples, you inhale them, throw them back at him, bing bing boom, deforestation. That's when you get to collect the sparkling stars that were mentioned in the story. Then it's finally time for the best part of the game. I love Kirby. And then it flips you to the next area and you go on like this until you reach the end of the game. It is a very fun gameplay loop, especially since the theming of the levels change and ramp up in difficulty each time. The next boss, wait a second. Is that the hero Lolo from the hit puzzle-based adventure game The Adventures of Lolo, developed by HAL Labs and released on the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1989? Wow, what a world. Anyways, the next boss is much harder than Wispy. It confines you to a tight space where you have to think and react quickly as you can't rely on flying to get away. And they continue to switch up the bosses like this, with the next one being a shooter based by using the mint leaf, which is honestly a really cool concept. I love that they've been making unique boss fights like this ever since the first game. I've already mentioned all the other ones, so I can't leave out my favorite Kracko. They're honestly just a big test of your skill, flying sporadically and giving you small windows to attack. Maybe a bit too much if I'm being honest, but I enjoyed it. Then finally, you've collected all but one of the sparkling stars, so you make your way to Mount DDD. You fly into the castle in your warp star and you land here, in a boss rush room. This is honestly pretty disappointing. I mean, we've been through so much just to get here, and we have to go through many segments of all the previous levels and fight the bosses of those levels. To add insult to injury, there aren't even any healing items, so you're very likely to die here, which just feels saddening. At least they saved the progress you've made through the bosses if you do die. I was really hoping to run through DD's castle and beat up all of his minions just to make it to his throne room and put a stop to him, but oh well. Side note for this weird thing, this Gordo's blocking the door to get to the bosses, and to get rid of them you need to collect Kirby's. They act as a screen wipe. I mean, they could have just used the mic or something, but nope, you just collect a Kirby. There's also a bunch of Kirbys in the title screen, and in this one title card, God, I think they're spreading. Once you beat all the bosses, again, you finally get to fight Triple D himself. It is honestly a really good fight. It makes use of your abilities really well, having to quickly pick up the stars he leaves behind, all the while learning his attack patterns to jump out of the way at just the right time. It feels very satisfying. Just like that though, it's over. You shoot him out of the castle as all the sparkling stars gather on Kirby, turning him into a hot air balloon. I mean, okay, if it works, it works. Kirby flies over Dreamland, returning all the food and being praised as a hero for saving the day. Just like that, the day is saved and the game is over. I mean, it was really good, but kinda short. Oh. Yep, there's a bonus mode, as the game calls it. It's essentially a new game plus, with faster enemies that do more damage. Of course, it's not required by any means, as you've technically already beat the game, but I did it anyway to see what it was like. This definitely seems like a mode that was made for more experienced gamers, whereas the main game is for the intended purpose of newer players. You can tell because the bosses in this are brutal, specifically Kabula. All the other bosses are way faster with new attacks that do a bunch of damage, but you can learn their attack patterns and find ways to deal with them. Kabula, though, you can go straight to HE double hockey sticks. See, the thing is, the Game Boy can't handle a bunch of entities moving at high speeds while loaded on the same screen, so it lags the game. The normal Kabula fight was fine because there was never too many cannonballs to lag the game that harshly. In the bonus mode though, there are so many balls, and you're lagging during it while having a big hitbox because you're puffed up, and having to focus on your position and Kabula's position so you can hit it with a mint leaf, and it just randomly decides to dash at you with no warning. It's just, And reminder, you have to fight it twice. The second time you have to hope you manage to kill it with enough lives so you can take care of all the other mini stages and bosses. And God forbid you get a game over and have to start this level all over again. It's not even that big of a deal, this is just a silly bonus mode, but god, they really need to patch this in the next update. DDD's fight is fine, he inhales a lot more doing it, which is weird, but his attack patterns are easy enough to figure out. Once you go through the cutscene and credits, once more you're rewarded with a casting call, showing all the names of the creatures you come across on your journey, which I honestly just think is a really nice detail. It just makes all the enemies seem like they have a lot more to them. Then you're rewarded with an even harder bonus mode. Just kidding. You get access to the config mode, which allows you to set your own health and lives whenever you play, or just to look at all the songs and sound effects in the game. I love that they added this. It's small and unimportant, but it just feels special that the devs would include something like this. Also, the ending scene when DDD starts crying and Kirby feels bad, so they try to comfort them is so heartwarming. Love to see the start of their friendship. The art in this game is really good. Running through the levels, you can see how much care and detail is put into every stage, with each being very distinct. Even just looking at a screenshot of a level, it's easy to tell which area it belongs to. The visual distinction is made more impressive by the fact that devs couldn't use color. Each area looks distinct purely based on the design of the ground, the sky, the enemies, etc. For example, remember earlier when I made a funny about green greens not being green? Well, despite that, it's very easy to tell that this area is flourishing and full of life, with trees and flowers abundant throughout the level. Outside of the levels, the characters are super cute. Kirby himself, despite having a different design, still looks super cute. His design was actually meant to be a placeholder, but Sakurai became fond of his roundness and the fact that he's a simple character to draw, so they decided to keep him how he was. You can't perfect perfection after all. Kirby's sprite is also super cute, encapsulates his roundness. Most of the characters in the game are round actually, all having the same basic shape with a few exceptions. That's not a bad thing at all though. Having too many varying designs isn't very pleasing on the eyes. It's good they all have the enemies visually similar, plus they're also super cute. Overall, the art is just really good for the time period it came out in, and it set a standard for the games of the future, being cute round creatures. The sound design in this game is superb, especially the music. If you're familiar with Kirby music at all, then you should know that it slaps. And that remains consistent even to the very first game, with a bunch of classics like Green Greens and DDD's theme. All the music fits the areas that they're set in super well too. Green Greens is bright and peppy to match the joyful atmosphere. The boss theme is fast-paced to get you in the mood for the battle. Float Islands has a tropical vibe as you explore the oceanic islands. Or even the invincibility theme, perfect for running through hordes of enemies. The only one I find a little odd is Castle Lololo. I love it to death, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't really scream Haunted Castle to me, I don't know. Overall though, the music is just amazing, getting tons of remixes in future games, and rightfully so. Here's my favorites. Outside of music, the sound effects are really good, matching the actions perfectly and becoming classics for all the other Kirby games. Some even still appearing to this day, with stuff like the door sound, 1-up sound, or even just the floating sound effect. They're all very satisfying to listen to as you play. So that's Kirby's Dream Land. While it's nothing groundbreaking by today's standards, for the time period it came out in, this was a must-have. Even now, I enjoy running through these stages and trying to see what Square can get, or just experience the amazing design and the music that goes along with it. It is really disappointing that the final level was just a boss rush, considering how short the game is. It just feels like padding to make the game feel longer, but doesn't bring the game down that much overall. I'd recommend playing this if you get the chance. Just be careful for the extra mode. Okay, love you, bye.